Hello and welcome all to our 12th webinar. As you know, this is a knowledge series in our project, India EU ICT Standardization Project. Today's topic is OpenAirInterface's 5G work in regards to standardization. So this project is basically hosted in European institute called as Eurecom, which is very close to the European Telecommunication Standards Institute, HC, and they are in fact working on this open air interface software alliance for quite some time, and it's a very interesting work that they are doing, and basically it open sources the 5G related work, and that is what we have today's speaker, Mr. Irfan Gauri, to talk about this project and the work today. We also have with us our moderator for today, Mr. A.K. Mittal, as we fondly call him, and he's an advisor to TSDSI on the topic of wireless and wireline systems, which essentially means the topic of 5G in today's relevance. So just to briefly introduce to you both the speakers. So Mr. Mittal is basically coming with a deep background in the topic. He's a graduate from IIT Roorkee. I don't want to mention the number of years of experience, but you can imagine already 4 decades of work. In his past experience, he has been working with DOT and with TEC, and now he's working with TSDSI. For Irfan, who is Director of Operations, he has an MBA and a PhD in Electrical Engineering, and he has also worked for last 15 years in various positions. Now he has, as a director of operations, he's spreading the alliance as an evangelist for this alliance, and that is what Irfan is doing, and maybe Irfan can share more when he gives the presentation. Now I would also make some housekeeping announcement before I give the mic to Mr. Mittal to introduce the topic. You are welcome to ask any questions during the webinar. We will only answer them, once the presentation is over. So there is a questions tab where you can type the questions, and as you keep typing them, we will keep assigning them to the speaker and moderator. So don't hesitate to ask questions, but wait for the presentation to be over. So without further ado, I welcome Mr. Mittal to introduce the topic.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody from different parts of the world who are on, who have joined this webinar. Thank you very much for joining. As a topic is, a topic of very great importance in today's fast-paced development of technology in mobile space, and we are all aware that the pace at which standards are being developed, and the industry has kept pace with that. They are producing equipment. But what we all know, and the fact is that despite the deep activity in standardization and standards being available, there are still hardware and software which are proprietary. And proprietary, once we say proprietary, it has its own pros and cons, which I need not mention here. But to the reverse of it, if the things are not proprietary, it helps interoperability, it helps efficiency, it helps innovation, create new services, to deploy services fast, and everybody everybody benefits, and people who are not involved in initial development of things, they can in fact create new services, new features onto the network and other things. So with 5G coming in, what is very important to note that software-defined network and network function virtualization are the backbone for 5G. So the services of 5G are basically software-driven itself, and there is a lot of separation between hardware and software and the control planes and the actual data flow planes. So this gives an opportunity far more than which was available till the earlier systems, whereby the software platforms can be made where you can develop services and products which are open. They have open interfaces, and your reliance on proprietary interfaces or proprietary software lessens. We can't say that it will be entirely free of that, but we can definitely enhance the separation of software and hardware to an extent greater than what is already standards. So this open interface software alliance basically works on 3GPP stack. So standard is 3GPP, but implementation part, it tries to provide software platforms which can be used for innovation and development of services and all those benefits which we see when we talk of open interfaces. You know about open stacks. So when we talk of open interfaces, open stacks, open interfaces combined with ecosystem is going to deliver a lot of benefits in the coming days. So with this brief introduction, I would now request Mr. Irfan Gauri to please start with this presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Mr. Mittal and Sachin and Mr. Mittal. Thanks a lot for taking the time to introduce the topic in a very appropriate way. Basically, what you said summarizes the setting here, and also some of the reasons why open source is such a buzzword and used in so many different places. I have another presentation over here that I did not want to copy anything from that. It comes from another organization, but I will flash that at times because I think it's important for the subject that we are dealing with over here. And this organization is the ORAN Alliance that has recently been founded by the operators. So the subject today is really something that is related to standardization. So something that relates OpenAirInterface or in general open source to standardization. And one of the reasons we have chosen to speak about this topic here to you guys who are also involved in standardization and very close to ETSI is that we are holding a joint workshop with ETSI at the end of the year. This is, I believe, one of the first times that an organization of the stature of ETSI is, doing something of this nature so close to an organization like us that is that's been involved in open source for a long while. So this standardization and open source is somehow starting to speak to each other, these communities, and this is wonderful news. So I would like to, during the course of this presentation, introduce the OpenAirInterface Software Alliance, also show you what are our objectives, and where we stand in development of some of the technology in 4G and going towards 5G, and the progress and the status of some of those things. But at the same time, I would also like to, rather than directly jumping in what we do, I would also like to speak a little bit about why we are doing that. And this somehow is a discussion that we cannot avoid, in the sense that even technical people who are obviously centered on technology and deep downs of 5G these days in this arena, they really need to understand, what's the reason why some of these things are starting to converge and make sense. So I will start with, if you bear with me, with 15 minutes on that topic, and then I would like to speak about the technical details of the OpenAirInterface software. So just very quickly, what is the OpenAirInterface Software Alliance? That's ourselves. Well, this is an organization that was founded by a research school called Euricom, that's based in the south of France. And initially, it started out by being a research tool to implement 3G back in those days, back in the early 2000s, and to show to the research community and industry new algorithms and different ways of doing things. So it started out like that, and over time, the OpenAirInterface software that started out, as I said, by being a 3G stack, evolved and was used more and more in research, in joint research projects within the European Commission. Over time, what happened was that industry started getting interested little by little by what was being done over here. And so back in 2015, a structure was established in which Euricom, which is the research school, is the founding member. And then there is a bunch of other organizations that joined us, among which industry. I'll show you this in a bit. And the goal here is really to try to implement a 3GPP stack over using open source software and on commercial off-the-shelf hardware. So this means PCs, off-the-shelf radio equipment, and other pieces of hardware that I'm going to speak about in a little bit. So the alliance now looks like this in its strategic board. So Euricom, being the founding member, started this work back in early 2000s, and then organizations like, companies like Orange, who's the operator in France, TCL, which is the Chinese phone company, handset company that also owns the Alcatel brand that used to be a French brand a little while back. So they joined the alliance, and then Nokia Bell Labs is one of our key contributors and strategic members. Fujitsu from Japan is one of our members. Technicolor used to be a member. They have, this also shows how this arena is changing very fast. So they abandoned this, 5G work, and now they, as of a few months, they are no longer a technical member. A strategic member. Okay, and then we have a bunch of other companies who are interested in relatively small scale work with rather focused work with OpenAirInterface. And here you have pretty big names like InterDigital and Samsung Research America. But you also have smaller companies and companies who traditionally did not have anything to do with telecommunications. For example, Renault, this is the French car company, automobile company, who recently joined us because obviously, much is happening in the automobile vertical in terms of communications, 5G, and all their plans to go to connected driving and autonomous driving going further down the road. Tasta is a very small company, and they do applications. So this also shows how diverse the ecosystem is. They have a push-to-talk application, which is based on the OpenAirInterface software. BlackNet is a company that works for the German Defense Ministry as one of their main customers, and they do a lot of core network work. So everything that has to do with the MME and all the insights of the core network, they are working on that. And there's a bunch of other members, among which there are universities. We have some Indian partners as well, Hyderabad IIT being one of them, and recently IIS, who also joined the alliance. And some Indian companies we are talking to, negotiating right now for them to enter the alliance. So, well, this is something I've already said about this talk. I'm going to speak for a very short while about why things are converging with standardization and open source and different kinds of things that are coming together. And then I go into the specifics of the OpenAirInterface. I'll speak about the features and the evolution of an ongoing work with the OpenAirInterface. So just very quickly, I would like to connect what we are doing with the market. Now, well, the point here is that Sorry. Okay, so let me continue. I thought there was some interruption there, but anyway, I mean, I would like to speak about four factors that describe how efficiently and how frequently a market trades. So this applies to all kinds of markets, but obviously we're focusing on the telecom market over here. Now, one of the factors that's extremely important for markets to trade efficiently is the crowd size, which means that the numbers of buyers and sellers in the market must be a significant number. Now, if you look at any example, any market, for example, the food market, restaurants, whatever, what you see over here is that there are lots of customers. I mean, everybody wants to go to a restaurant and eat, and there are lots of sellers over here. So this market trades very, very frequently. We all know about that. Now, if you look at the telecoms market by comparison to that, I mean, this is a market that in which the vendors are the Nokias, etc., who are vending telecom equipment, and the buyers in this market are service providers, so the Oranges and Bhartitel and all those companies. What's happening over here is that the crowd size looks to be pretty good. I mean, there are lots of operators around the world, and there are people who are selling as well. So the overall number seems to be okay. I mean, this crowd size doesn't seem to be such a problem. But if we come to the second factor over here, which is important for markets to trade frequently and efficiently, that is called float. Now, float basically means that the product availability should be significant. So there must be a large number of sellers also on the market. The difficulty with the telecom market, obviously, over here is that there has been a lot of the companies have been bought by each other, and the number of telecom vendors, in fact, has significantly reduced. So this is one of the reasons that this market has little innovation. There is vendor lock, because there's just a small number of vendors left in the market. And this definitely is one of the reasons that the overall environment in this market is not very healthy. And there are initiatives, obviously, by operators to try to get out of this situation that we'll speak about in a bit. The third factor that makes markets trade efficiently is natural demand. Now, if you look at the telecom market, everybody keeps saying over here that the demand for data is massive, it's increasing, and there's going to be new use cases, etc. All that is completely true. But that's from a consumer perspective or the end user perspective. If you look at it from the perspective of the operators themselves, well, they have to spend a lot of money in order to buy this equipment, in order to, to put out the 5G, well, the 4G plus and the 5G services. I was hearing from Orange that this is going to be an 18 billion investment from them, going towards 5G. The difficulty is that if they cannot find a way to make money and make a bottom line out of that, then there is a sort of a problem with natural demand over there. So this is definitely a consideration over here in this market. Operators are stuck in a position where it's very difficult for them to move ahead and do all the investments that are necessary. And the final factor, which is the most important factor over here, and this is why I wanted to relate the market setting with what we call standardization in the 3GPP and the telecom arena in general, is the standardization factor. In order for products, for a market to trade efficiently, there has to be products sameness. So this is where standardization has played a role, no doubt about that. Over the years, there used to be a time back in the 90s and the 2000s when there used to be different standards in the United States and in Europe and in Asia. And over time, things have really converged in the sense that 3G became the worldwide standard, and then 4G ultimately is the same everywhere. So all that is good. On the other hand, the standardization has not really gone all the way, as Mr. Mittal was also saying a few minutes ago. What's happened is that Well, there is a lot of intellectual property here. So companies go ahead and speak about what they call standard blocking patents. So basically standardization, but at the same time, there is an effort on part of different companies to introduce their IPR and block, to block the standard so that you cannot really do things in an open way. And this is something that we are also dealing with right now in the OpenAirInterface Software Alliance in terms of our license and our license discussions with ETSI. So that is one factor. But then there is another factor, which is that of not going the full mile in standardization. And this is something that Mr. Mittal also spoke about a few minutes ago. There are certain things that are standardized, but not all the way, which allows for vendors, since they are in such a position of strength, to sort of block this, and multi-vendor operation is no longer possible. So standardization is really a factor over here that has not really delivered all its potential by making, in order to make the market fluent. So this is why some of the work that is that is going to be spoken about over here, or that's going to be done in the coming times, will really have people trying to do things in a different way in terms of the standardization. And so the current situation in the market is that the operators themselves, they are trying to deal with the fact that the vendors have this lock. They are trying to open it. You probably know well that there are a number of initiatives out there. Many of them, very well known. There's the ONF initiative in the United States, starting from Stanford, in which there's MCORD component, which is supposed to work on open source in order to open up these different interfaces that are closed. There is TIP initiative, Telecom Infrastructure initiative, that was started by Facebook and some other companies with the idea of trying to open up all these locked places where the vendors have a lock, for example, the front hall. If you look at some of the insights of the the working groups of the telecom infrastructure project, you are going to see over there initiatives like the vRAN front hall project, and the agenda of that working group is to open up the front hall interface. If you look at the Open RAN work group within the TIP initiative, then you are going to see that what they are proposing, what they are planning to do with some vendors and some operators, mainly operators and Intels and some other companies, is to try to open up the implementation of RAN and make it implement RAN functions on general purpose processes. So, well, different companies, different operators are trying to deal with this in different ways. This is something that I took as a quote from somebody who's apparently, an expert at some of these topics. What he has mentioned is that Verizon recently, instead of trying to come up to join hands with other operators in trying to pressurize vendors, what they are trying to do is to speak directly to the vendors and say to them, okay, make yourself interoperable between yourselves, or especially all these proprietary interfaces that they have. Front hall being one of the main ones that the vendors are very, very reluctant to open up. So this is one way of going forward, which is not very efficient, quite honestly, in my opinion, also because when things are structured in a market the way they are right now, with vendors in small numbers and quite in control of the insights of the RAN, this initiative is not going to pay much. On the other hand, you have another approach which has been initiated this year by, by the ORAN Alliance. This was announced at MWC in Barcelona, the founding of this sorry, organization. And this is an organization that has been founded by service providers. And the idea over here clearly is to go ahead and standardize what 3GPP does not standardize. Now, this is a very interesting approach. So once you have, suppose that we arrive at a stage where there's 3GPP standardization and then there is ORAN standardization. So vendors will ultimately have to comply with 3GPP standardization, and on top of that, ORAN standards, whatever ORAN comes up with. So this simply to say that the ecosystem is evolving, especially in terms of the standardization. Now, here is ETSI that says that ETSI or 3GPP organization that says that we have standardized 5G or 4G, and others who come up and say, well, you have standardized it, but you have not standardized it enough, and we will go ahead and standardize the rest. Right. So this has repercussions. I was speaking to the ETSI colleagues there, and I was telling them, and they were pretty much agreeing to this, that there have to be movements now also from ETSI and maybe 3GPP also towards finding some kind of new ground, new basis of working, where standardization probably should go a little bit further than what it has been doing until now. So basically, ORAN Alliance is specifying APIs and interfaces, and it wants to drive the standards by defining some of these interfaces. And one of the main points that they bring up is that open source is going to be, and virtualization, both are going to be an important factor over here. So I just quickly wanted to show you here this slide from ORAN. I can show this in full screen mode. So this is the on the right, you can see the keywords on which the ORAN Alliance is focused. And you can very well see standardization and open source as being a big topic over here. And the OpenAirInterface Software Alliance is very closely working with the ORAN ORAN Alliance in order to see how we can move forward on these topics. Okay. So anyway, I mean, these are things that I discussed. OpenAirInterface Software Alliance understands this change, we believe, and given that we are one of the best known open source communities out there at present, with a bunch of with a large number of contributors from the academic world, but also more and more initiatives of testing, prototyping, and also productization that are underway using the OpenAirInterface code. I think we are very well positioned to introduce some of this code and make it available to initiatives where with common goals as us. So yeah, very briefly, OpenAirInterface that we nicely called OAI for short, traditionally used to be a research and POC kind of tool demonstrating this and that as algorithm at physical layer or at MAC level. And then over time, recently, this is more recent, back in 2016-17, there have been deployments of systems in the real world using some of the components of the OpenAirInterface. Now, some examples of this are a private LTE network that Fujitsu, being one of the strategic partners of the alliance, they are building at present, and also Facebook's rural connectivity software, that the EPC software, so the core network has some components of the OAI in it. And now, number 3, we are moving more and more towards demonstrations of different, real life cloudification, virtualization, mobile edge computing scenarios, where new players like the Red Hats and other companies are coming towards us, and we are implementing some of these things, and also moving towards testing, and hopefully get more involved in the standardization of future networks based upon the OAI software. So all these keywords that, mega trends that you have over here, have in one way or another OpenAirInterface involved. As I spoke about the private LTE, rural coverage is an area where many small companies are using the OAI to deploy. Slicing and modularization of RAN are also topics in which OpenAirInterface is being heavily used to prototype and demonstrate things, machine to machine, and other topics. IoT are also hot topics in OAI at present, and all available in the repositories of the OpenAirInterface. So in general, just to summarize, regarding the role of open source in all of this, is to say that, of course, prototyping and standardization are topics in which we believe open source will be heavily involved. ORAN has reached us in order to help them, for us to help them implement, since they are defining interfaces, the two sides of the interface with the APIs that they define, they want some pre-commercial, some test functionality to be built there on the basis of OpenAirInterface, and this will also allow demonstration of what's possible, and also encourage in time companies who may build some pieces of this modularized RAN to do interoperability testing with the OAI. So some kind of reference design may be ultimately achieved using the OpenAirInterface. And of course, for the operators, there are many other opportunities, especially in the mobile edge computing world, where they can have a better handle on data analytics opportunities, build a platform in a similar way as as the big tech companies have managed to do, like the Googles and the Apples, at the edge of the network. This is definitely an area that operators are aware of and interested in. They may not have the skills and the expertise to be able to do that, but at least the idea is there, and there is awareness. And then obviously the question of enhancing competition by opening up the interfaces and having more vendors there is definitely also an important subject. Okay, so now that we have sort of introduced the OpenAirInterface and where open source really has its importance or value as we move forward towards standardization and opening up certain parts of the network. I'd like to speak a little bit about what the OpenAirInterface has actually implemented. So this is stuff that comes from my colleagues who work on on these pieces of software. So right now, this is what the OpenAirInterface stack looks like. So this is completely 3GPP implementation of a UE, 4G UE, and I'll speak about 5G in a minute, and eNodeB, and the EPC, so the core network. So all these three pieces, in fact, we call them two pieces. One is the radio access part, including the UE and eNode B, and the other part being the EPC. They are all part of the offering of the OpenAirInterface open software. Now, if needed, we can look at some of these details over here. What is being implemented? Let's not go into each and every of one of these items over here, but the general statement that I would like to make over here is that the physical layer implements these specs that are very well known to the 3GPP people. And right now, this is a very recent status, 25/6/2018. What is implemented here is 8.6, release 8.6 of LTE, and a subset of release 10. Now, this thing is not necessarily implemented or tracked as compatible with a certain release of the stand. So we will not go forward and start implementing everything that pertains to release 11, 12, 13. Since it's an open source community, this depends a lot on what different partners and different contributors are interested in. So it may be that some features from release 10 are implemented, or release 11, 12, 13 are implemented, or further, but others may not be. So we will not be all the time release compliant with the 3GPP. What you see over here is that some detail. You have the bandwidth from 5 to 20 megahertz that are implemented, and one thing that I should mention over here is that these are live. These are deployed as a live network. We have a very comprehensive continuous integration bench, which is a complete end-to-end network, meaning that it works in a real setting, lab setting. We have Faraday cages in which we put the node B of the OAI in front of, and in front of those, of that node B, we put commercial UEs. So as you can see down below over here, category 3 or 4 UEs, and those UEs are connected to the node B, and a certain number of continuous integration tests are passed each time a contributor contributes code into the OAI repositories. So which means that as soon as you have introduced a feature, or even if you have just made a bug fix, then as soon as you merge that code back into the OAI repositories, what's going to happen is that the automated continuous integration is going to kick into place, and it will test whether your code works and doesn't break any of the existing functionality. So this has been one of the major achievements of the OpenAirInterface Software Alliance lately, this setting up of this CI bench. And one of the reasons we have done that is, as I was mentioning before, there are many users of the OAI now, and one of them is also productization. So people want stable code, and our objective over here is really to provide stable feature complete, whatever be the set of features that we agree upon in our technical committees. We implement those, but they must be tested, and it's only then that we can declare them as features. So this all that I'm saying over here pertains to 4G. Very quickly on the Mac layer, we have a subset of release 8.6 that is implemented, and this is something that is going forward. You can see some of these keywords over here, and this is pretty standard terminology in 3GPP that you would want to be implemented in eNode B, or if it were to work with real commercial UEs. PDCP release 10 compliant, and it has all the necessary features to be able to interface with on the other side, the EPC and on the downside with the UVs. So this is also part of the standard code. One thing that I should mention is that there is a lot of work that is going on as we evolve from PDC. I mean, in PDCP as we evolve towards 5G, because that's where some new interfaces are being introduced now, and we're going to speak about that in a second. RLC features, I mean, these are all things that are listed in the wiki of 3GPP, no, sorry, of OpenAirInterface Software Alliance. And you can, you know, if there are certain things that you would like to know more details of and why they are not implemented.
Hello, Irfan, just a timekeeping announcement. So if you can summarize in 5 minutes, then we can take some questions.
Okay, sure, yeah. Okay, so I'll just quickly skip the features. This is some of the ongoing work, main topics being LTE-M and BIoT, device-to-device and 5G NR. All these are available in different branches of the OpenAirInterface code. Hardware, we recommend a certain number. As I was saying, this works with the commercial off-the-shelf hardware. So basically, USRPs is what we recommend. There are other experimental platforms that we are also working with. It works with ARM and Intel. You know, depending upon your use case, you can use any of these. We also have antennas, reflectors, etc. Okay, so 5G. So yeah, this is just a list of 5G activities that are going on right now. Maybe I should skip this. 5G NR roadmap. So as you can see, we are. This is something that was demonstrated. The 5G, the thing in the red box, was demonstrated at Barcelona. So these are the current capabilities of the 5G UE, and since we are building UE and new radio G-Node B, so these are the current capabilities of it. And end of 2018, we will have massive MIMO and I mean the 28 gigahertz high bands also implemented. Some more information about 5G NR specs. One thing I wanted to quickly speak about is this cloud virtualized deployment. So OpenAirInterface software is really being re-architectured to implement all the splits that are being defined in different in 3GPP and other places. So here, what you can see is that the software now is organized in three parts. The software, we have the central unit, the distributed unit, and the remote radio unit. This is something that was demonstrated in the ONS, Linux Foundation Open Network Summit this September in Amsterdam. So yeah, this is work that many operators are in fact interested in, China Mobile being one of them, and we're working very closely with them to do this. And FAPI is also a subject. It's one more of the splits that OpenAirInterface provides, and if needed, I can provide the details of that later. We work in a way where we have regular meetings on. I mean, there's a big group of 5G NR people who are interested in that and working on that, and so we have these regular meetings weekly. Once with China, with Asia, and once with US, alternate weeks, where we take decisions on how to move forward on different topics. There are some numbers here, and yeah, should probably not go into too much detail. 5G core network is also an ongoing project. So currently we have this as implementation that you see, this, which is the 4G core. And the idea is to start splitting it, so splitting up the MME function into AMF and SMF. And this is the work that has already started over here. And those who are interested in the 5G core can come and take a look at some of our at the repositories in order to see how this work is going on. Yeah, so just to remind you that we are having our joint HCUSA workshop in December in Sofia Antipolis. Many of these subjects are being discussed over there, so please come and meet us here and get engaged with the OpenAirInterface Software Alliance. So thanks a lot for your time. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So thank you for doing this courageous webinar, Irfan, because it's such a vast topic, and you kind of really agreed on our suggestions of including technical topics as well. So we are quite happy, as well as we are grateful to you to do this courageous thing, and I'm sure anybody in the audience would also agree that there are so many details yet to be really discussed and covered. So while we'll ask our audience to type questions, so we have some of our own questions if you're willing to answer them.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I have been to Eurocom multiple times, and one of the motivation to kind of promote your work was that it allows low cost research in the area of 5G. And as you know, 5G is a very important topic, let's say for a country like India right now. The question to you is that the hardware that you showed, if somebody, let's say a researcher or a professor, were to set up a 5G research, what is an approximate cost that would be there to have this kind of a hardware setup? Is there any ballpark figure that you can suggest?
Yeah, the current implementation of depends on what you are trying to do. So let's say the 5G NR, basically this is two big powerful PCs that are sitting in front of each other, one that is implementing the UE. So this is something like 14 core Intel i7 PC, and another one that is doing the G-Node B, which is a similar machine. This one is, in our case, it's in our lab, it's an i9 18 core PC. So there are these two machines, and then you need the radio hardware, which costs, for example, in this case, this N300 series is the one that allows for 5G transmission. So this has a cost of approximately 10,000 euros. Right? So those two PCs plus the 10,000 euro N300 does the job.
So what's that number coming out to be? Let's say in this particular example, is that 20,000 euros or 30,000 euros?
Of 15 to 20,000 euros.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know, because when you are an individual researcher, these numbers matter a lot, and I can share from my observation there is a lot of interest in India to do 5G related research, and your work at the OpenAirInterface might provide them the needed software, but they still need to buy the hardware, right? So now the second question is, you mentioned about your workshop with Etsy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for anybody to come and attend that workshop, what is the key takeaway from the workshop, if you may? Yeah.
Okay. So two things. One is that we have a comprehensive training day. 11th of December is only OAI training. So training of this the different components. So the E-Node B, G-Node B, the core. So it's a good way to sit there and go through the whole stack. The training of the whole stack by our experts.
But do you expect people to bring hardware, or I mean, how do you expect them to go through this? Is it like more like a theoretical thing? Or what is the kind of expected audience that you may suggest?
Yeah, so all the new users of OAI, I think, will gain a lot. There will be some presentations, but we also have, running demos on some very basic OAI use cases. So you can not only ask questions during the presentations themselves, but also speak to live demo people who are going to do live demos there. And
Oh, that's very good to know. And maybe offline, I will connect you with also to understand what is the typical audience for such a workshop. Is it mostly academics, or is it small and medium enterprises, or is it research companies? Because right now I see that there's a question from Sama from TCS, who is a researcher, and I don't know if you can see his question.
I cannot, but
Okay, I can read it out for you because there is a questions tab. So Samar is asking, what is the current status of OINR 5G development? I think you had a slide on it, but maybe for Samar's reference, you may just specify again that I think, yeah, this slide.
right. So just very quickly, Sachin, first, what you mentioned, the audience. I think it's a great way for small companies and those who really want to do some research or demo start their work with OAI to come to the workshop. Because that'll be the best way to to jump us out to kickstart your work, and you'll have the right you'll be able to meet the right people who will guide you through even when you leave the venue. Okay, regarding the status of OAI NR 5G development. As you know, the standard was frozen only a few months back. And the demo that we did with the OpenAirInterface in Barcelona, by that time, that was March, by that time the standard had not been completed. So what we had done was we were working with the 4G protocol stack, and we had accelerated the PHY, in fact, by including the 5G component there. So the PHY was was 5G, and the upper layers were 4G. So now, end of this year, we'll have a full stack implementation of 5G available. So that is the status right now. Now, if you look at the details, it's still SISO. We don't have MIMO implemented right now, but this is also work in progress. And at the end of this year, we'll have full stack 5G doing the downlink available.
So I hope that answers Samar's question. Maybe Samar, you can type in the questions tab if you're satisfied with the answer. So now we have Irfan 3 questions from Ms. Deepa Tyagi, who is working with TEC, Telecom Engineering Center. And she has very interesting questions for you. So I'll read them one at a time, or you want to hear all 3 at one go?
I'm trying to expand this tab. For some reason, I can't do that. And otherwise, I would.
No worries. I am there to help. So she's saying in her first question, you discussed some of the mega trends being witnessed in the radio access network. However, there are so many alliances working on these trends like CRAN, MEC, XRAN, eCPRI, etc. So I mean, maybe that was her observation. The second question is, how similar or different are these initiatives? So that's her first question. And then she's asking the second question, which is also linked. What is ITU's take on these? So if you may answer these 2 questions.
Okay, so yeah, for the first one, how similar are these initiatives? I believe that the objectives are similar, but it depends on who are the founders. Personally, I think that wherever the operators are in the leading position are probably initiatives that will at least politically lead to something. They'll have some pressure on the vendors. But what I find, I mean, we have been working very closely with many of these initiatives, TIP and Nohrin, etc. The difficulty is that no actual work happens. There's a lot of political discussions, because this is pretty high level. People who are involved are pretty high level. So our role in all of this, the OpenAirInterface Software Alliance, is to provide code. That's all we do. We provide code to all these initiatives. They come and pick up pieces of code from us, and then they go ahead and implement this, with ourselves and with their own engineers. So we set up collaborations of that kind with them. So while these initiatives may be very political and thought leaders, we are sort of supplement them by providing them very basic code on the basis of which they can do their demos and different developments. And as far as the ITU is concerned, I'm afraid I have no knowledge of what they do, so I can't really answer that.
Yeah, that's okay, Irfan. But I think that finishes our question from the audience, and we have really enjoyed the webinar as much you would have. So I invite Mr. Mittal if you want to say a few concluding remarks on this.
Yes, so I must first thank the audience to have stayed throughout this webinar and put very important and good questions. And then also thank a lot to Mr. Irfan, who has, in a very limited time, he has tried to cover a lot of things, including the current status of work in 5G area and its roadmap. And I think it well matches with what is happening on the standards front. So probably there will be a lot of interest in what you are doing, and there will be more researchers and people who will be working on these open source standards, and things will happen. But what I feel is that a good question which came is what about ITUR? What is doing? So I'm not sure what your alliance can do or think about it. But ITUR is a body, which is represented by nation states. So and these people who attend ITUR, they are the people who regulate the technology and the standards in the countries. So it is, I think, open source based implementations, and maybe talking with ITU on how to make it, because make it a good use of it as a technological effort, something like that. If a dialogue happens with ITU, probably a better direction can be set for open source based implementations. So with that small comment, I must thank Mr. Irfan for such a nice and very informative presentation, and good luck to all the participants and future endeavors.
So I just want
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, I just want to thank you again, Irfan. But if you could also show a slide where your contact details are there, in case if somebody wants to contact you, how can they reach you? Do you have a slide where your contact details?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't hear you properly.
I was
Sachin,
saying, do
the
you have
best
a
way is
slide
to visit the OpenAir interface web page and there.
Okay.
It
Because
all
I'm
comes to you.
sure this webinar, if there is an interest or follow-up questions, so maybe the participants can reach out to you. And in case I don't see the slide where your contact detail is there, but I can probably suggest to the participants, if you have any further questions, I have Irfan's contact detail. I can connect you. And with that, I would like to thank all of you again and have a very good day. And maybe by the next month, we will be back with another webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.